Okay, so I'm just going to make a video here taking a look at the astrology that's currently going on. So I'm recording this on December 7th, and Venus is just separating from a sextile with Mars in Scorpio, getting a bit of support from Mars there, which I think is Mars in its own sign of Scorpio, especially. I think there's going to be a bit of that libidinal juice. There's going to be a bit of that. The I think both Venus and Mars can have a bit their own kind of arrows to them, but I think it's kind of gives it that a bit of more of a push. I think, especially is a bit refreshing since we had Mars in Libra. It might have been coming out a bit more like sideways or passively or a bit repressed. With now that Mars is in its own sign, it's more of like the faucets have been released and that Mars is coming through strong basically, and it's supporting Venus in that sextile right now, which is perhaps refreshing because I think the stuff going on in Capricorn can be a bit of a drag, perhaps. Um, I think a lot of astrologers might try to spin up try to positivize things or try to find like what's the I think it is valuable, right? To provide to what's the kind of a deeper way to handle the difficulties that might come up. But if you look at that self node there, um, you kind of have the basic polarity of gain and loss, and increase and decrease, growth and entropy, and that can be seen between the Jupiter Saturn dynamic, and can also be seen in the north node and the south node dynamic. And there's something, it feels like a bit of a drag. I think there's a sort of a with back December 2nd, we had Venus conjunct the south node. And I think that ultimately, there might be something, a sense of being a bit disappointing, or kind of looking the gift horse in the mouth, or something like just being, maybe something's a bit cut short or something. It's just, then as you keep going, it is getting that sextile from Mars though, pretty close from 9 on December 3rd, bringing us up to, and then we've also had the Jupiter going into Capricorn here, changing the dynamic of Jupiter, and now Jupiter is also slowly approaching that south node there, which is it's you kind of got the kind of the mismatch, as Jupiter is probably resembles more of the north node. It's running into the south node, where it's heading there now anyways. And I think Jupiter is more about growth and excess, and the south node is really kind of like cutting back. Perhaps it could be looking to separate and distance oneself from something. It could be a decline in a certain area. And so I think maybe, it might be fitting though around this time of year, especially because it's like we're getting into December now, and the whole New Year's thing is not that far away. So um, there might be a lot of this the purging of the New Year's resolution of like, okay, I'm gonna cut all this out of my diet. I'm gonna go gluten free, and I'm gonna stop drinking, and I'm gonna cut sugar out, and all this sort of elimination kind of thing. Like Jupiter kind of has the reputation of like the jolly Santa Claus, kind of like putting on a few pounds over Christmas, and the South Node is it's kind of like, okay, now I've got to reduce and trim down and all this kind of thing. So that kind of stripped down kind of approach might be something that we see over the next year, perhaps, with Jupiter in Capricorn. It could be a more kind of like back to basics. It could be separating the wheat from the chaff. It could be stripping things down to their raw potential. The basic principles are like, what was all this, the fluff, get rid of the fluff, like boil it down, distill it, kind of thing. If you want to go in alchemical direction, perhaps. Um, so as we keep going here, Venus is running into applying a conjunction with Saturn, and that is Venus Saturn conjunctions and aspects are especially difficult. And I would say that the conjunctions they're not considered to be aspects because aspects are angular and we are actually just running into it in the same sign. That's something different. But based on the type of planets you're dealing with, it could be like as difficult as an opposition or something like this. Um, for, but I mean, it all depends perhaps on they're multivalent symbols, so it could apply to a lot of things. But Saturn being, a planet to do with decay and restrictions, limitations, illnesses, endings, and all this kind of stuff. Venus is likes to see like the growth of nice Venusian things. It doesn't like to see the end of them. Um, and it could be, but I mean, it could come out in other ways. It could be if you take Venus as a general significator for friendships, it could be Saturnian topics coming up in friendships, perhaps. It could be, it also depends on where this is all happening in the chart. Um, because it's gonna like highlight if you look at the chart as not just being your chart, it tells you what's happening around you, right? If you've got Capricorn in the fourth, it could say something about your parents. If you have Capricorn in the third, it could say something about your siblings, your uncles, your neighbors. The if you have in the seventh, it could say something about your partner, right? So the Saturn can mean, it could be also hard on luck with money, with Saturn and Venus being a kind of significator for wealth and value. It could be it could be realities of old age setting in, like maybe you go to visit your friends and now they have kids and it's not like it doesn't quite feel like the fun good old days. There's sort of like the setting in of time and aging into friendships. Could be something that comes up with Venus and Saturn. It could be somebody, you kind of want to relive the good old days. Maybe the kids thing isn't having to do with it. Maybe somebody's looking to relive some golden era, but the Saturnian, time it's a different time now or something like this. There could also be things like feeling limited in your own self-worth or self-confident, people having might feel self-conscious about their looks, how they're fashion, how they're presenting themselves. It could be somebody who's making art. It could be like an artistic blockage too. Like you're going for that beautiful Venetian thing, but you're hitting kind of like the wall. It's like, oh my God, like I'm not getting this how I want it to be. It's like I'm hitting my own limitations or something. These are all stuff that could come up with the Venus Saturn thing, and it could be a general, maybe a low mood around this, because it generally seemed to be one of the more difficult kinds of transits. Maybe this and like Moon Saturn transits too, perhaps. As you keep going, you have that perfection kind of happening on the 11th, over the 10th, 11th, and then it's on, and then it's moving into a conjunction with Pluto as well. And I mean, Pluto's close enough there so that the Pluto influence could be kind of felt throughout the Saturn thing as well, bringing up, I mean, what are you going to say about Pluto, the underworld kind of quality? There could be something perhaps a bit disturbing, perhaps it's the sort of the other side of the veneer, perhaps, right? Like if you could think that there's the underbelly, something of the underbelly coming through that you have to face and deal with coming up. Um, and I think it's also interesting to look that if we look at the moon here, this is all running up to a full moon. Um, Here we go. Switch the hours here and just get it. So yeah, December 11th, full moon. The full moon is exactly full here where I live, anyways, around 8:46 p.m. in the evening. After the sun has set, you've got the full moon coming up. Um, so what's interesting about the full moon is that the sun is in Sagittarius, the moon is in Gemini, and all this stuff we were talking about earlier in Capricorn is having next door in Capricorn, and that's in aversion to the full moon. The moon is not, it's in aversion to the moon, it's in aversion to the sun. So whatever's happening on this full moon, also the Mars stuff is not hitting the full moon at all. Um, Whatever is going on with this full moon, it it's kind of like it's a separate plot line to what is going on with all this stuff in Capricorn. And if you want to get to hints on what that is going to be, look at what houses are getting hit for you. There's not really, maybe if you get into the whole like Chiron asteroid kind of thing, you've got a bit of a trine going from Mercury to Chiron. But there's not. I'm not. You've got Neptune kind of in there, square with a loose kind of square to the sun, giving it a kind of that. Uh, well, I think what's going to be more interesting, really, within the full moon here, is going to be as you keep going after that full moon wanes, the sun keeps kind of coming along here. Okay. Oh, we're going by hour. This is going to take a while. Um, so the full moon is coming in its final little phase here. So the sun enters Capricorn. This is at the winter solstice. And then right around Christmas time, when we have the new moon on December 25th in Capricorn, and it's like, then it's kind of like, oh, hello, all this stuff that was going, we're talking about the Jupiter and its excesses getting this pressure to maybe cut back, if that's how you want to read it. The what was just went down, Venus is now on, Venus is now off into Aquarius. But all these kinds of things which might have been highlighted around these times, around when Venus had been making these transits here, are going to be kind of brought into light, if you want to put it that way, because now the illuminating light of the luminaries are creating a new moon in the sign. So we have the we have the Capricorn topics coming more into focus later on around Christmas, whereas while the full moon was happening, it's going to be putting a focus on whatever is going on in your, well, I mean, if you wanted personally, whatever is going on between Gemini and Sag in your chart. Those topics are going to be brought to the forefront. And so, of course, now we've also got the big old Jupiter, or sorry, Saturn Pluto conjunction coming up. But that's about a month away. So here, January 23rd. No, not quite. We got the moon there. Yes, January 21st. 23 degrees of Capricorn. You've got that, and then that's right after as the moon's in Aquarius there, so the moon is going to be getting in on this too, more around January 19th. So here you have the next kind of lunar cycle going as the sun moves through Capricorn, from Christmas into January. We're kind of got the preamble to that happening right now, and Venus being the one kind of moving through there before everybody else, kind of touching upon these topics, right? So now is, you know, now is the time maybe to listen to what's going on with Venus coming through there, and giving to give us idea of what's kind of going to be in store for us, when we have the peak of this Saturn Pluto thing going on. So I thought this is my attempt to just kind of take a look and talk about what's going on with of major interest over the next couple months here. I'll probably be doing more on this Saturn Pluto stuff, because it's kind of like it's the big thing happening these days.